What's going on, everybody? Let's Talk Jets Radio. Quick video here talking Haason Reddick. Cannot believe that we are still on this topic. For all the positive vibes that are around the team right now, there's just this one dark cloud that it seems like will not go away, and that's unfortunately this Reddick contract dispute, which surprisingly, I think that over the last 2 weeks, my thoughts have kind of changed on it, believe it or not. And you heard the Rodgers interview, I'm sure, yesterday on the McAfee show, where I think he jokingly mentioned, Reddick potentially firing his agent. I don't think there's truth to that, but it would be interesting, if maybe Reddick did come around and realize that this guy just completely steered him in the wrong direction. Had he just shown up on day one, not only would he not have these $8 million in fines that he can't recoup, but he'd probably have a few extra $1 million either in guaranteed money or incentives, at least for this year, if not long term. But now you start to, it seems like the conversation is sort of shifting a little bit towards what's the best use of that cap space, because ultimately now, once Reddick shows up, and he will, because he's not going to give the Jets his rights for next season, so he'll show up week 9, week 10, whatever the deadline is, and when he does show up, you're ultimately going to be paying for, about half a season for the full rate, and that's going to wipe out your remaining cap space, which would ultimately prevent you from getting a Devontae Adams. And then from Reddick's standpoint, his goal was to get more money, and he's essentially going to lose half his contract. And if he doesn't play well in those 8 or 9 games, whatever it is, he's going to be looking at, a 1-year prove-it deal possibly next year, something very incentive-laden, not the 2 to 3 year guarantee at $25 million per. So both sides have kind of dug in at this point, and it's hard to see either side being able to win unless they come to an extension. And that's where I think the Jermaine Johnson injury potentially changes this entire thing, because pass rusher is going to be a need for next season. As well as Will McDonald's playing right now, let's remember, he was supposed to replace Bryce Huff to some extent. And now you lost Jermaine Johnson, and you already traded away JFM. You don't have Quentin Jefferson. So there's a lot of sacks, a lot of productivity that you're trying to replace on that D-line. And as great as Will McDonald's playing right now, it's hard to imagine that he's going to keep up this pace for the entire season and get 25 or 27 sacks, whatever the number would be. At some point he's going to have a dip. Teams are going to adjust to him a little bit. I'm sure there's going to be, a couple stretches in there where he goes a game or two without a sack. So you need another pass rusher, not just for this year, but for next year. We all know what the window is. We saw Rodgers slinging around on Thursday night. We have every reason to believe that this is a playoff team that could go on a Super Bowl run this year and possibly next year as well. You have the franchise quarterback. You have the weapons around him. You have the pieces on defense. There's no reason for this team not to be all in on getting as much talent as possible and giving themselves the best chance to win in December and January. And having a guy like Reddick, who's a top 10 pass rusher in this league, gives you a chance to do that. And listen, it's nothing against McKinley or McGregor or any of these other young guys. I think they're all talented players. I think they all have bright futures in this league, but none of them are double-digit sack guys right now, and none of them, I think at least, are legitimate game changers. So you hope that Will McDonald can keep it going. Obviously, that would be great, but then other than him, who do you really have? And it was nice to see the defense at least kind of adjust on Thursday night, sending in, more blitzes, not relying on just the front four, which I don't think they're going to be able to do. But it would be nice, because that formula kind of worked against Mahomes when they saw him last year, where they, dropped, some extra guys into coverage. They were pretty much, if I remember right, just rushing 4 most of the night. Having a guy like Reddick on that D-line changes absolutely everything. So you want to give yourself the best chance to win this year, as well as extend that window into next year with as much talent as possible. It almost feels like you try to find a way to make things work. And we talk about the salary cap being a myth all the time. You could add void years. You could do all sorts of different things to manipulate the number. Yes, it would still probably cost, maybe a Conklin or a DJ Reed or possibly both when it comes to the offseason next year. But having a guy like Reddick, I think, is a complete game changer. I hate to reward a player who's gone about his dispute the way he has. And that's the only thing that I don't like about potentially extending him, that you have other guys like Rodgers and Tyron Smith and Mosley all who have, gone above and beyond with their contracts to give the team as much flexibility as possible. And then here comes Reddick, who still hasn't even put on the Jets uniform yet, and before he even walked in that building was already causing a headache. It's hard to reward a player like that. I totally understand it, but excuse me, but his resume ultimately is what it is. He's a double-digit sack guy. He's one of the best pass rushers in football. And if you compare that with what you're getting out of Will McDonald right now, plus Quinn Williams in the middle, and Kinlaw's playing pretty well, like, you've got more than enough talent for this thing to get really, really fun this year. And that's why, like, unless it's a choice of Reddick or Devontae Adams is a real possibility, and there's no way that they can make it work for both of them, even if Devontae Adams restructures, which I think he would have to, if it's the choice of one or the other, and Adams wants to be here, the Raiders are having their fire sale, you can make that work, and the only way to do it is to get rid of Reddick's contract, whether it's releasing him or trading him for pennies on the dollar. Maybe that's a sacrifice that you ultimately have to make, and I would kind of understand it. Otherwise, you need a pass rusher now, and you're going to need a pass rusher next year. You can't be guaranteed that Jermaine Johnson is going to be 100%. Again, it's different. I think it's so much different than a quarterback, especially like Rodgers, who's not as mobile, although he did look very good Thursday night. But for Jermaine Johnson, who relies on those quick twitch muscles and the first step, that explosiveness, it's hard to expect him to be 100% next year. And so you're going to be in the market in all likelihood for a pass rusher, whether it's in the draft or free agency or a trade. So why not find a way, 3-year extension, 2 years guaranteed, give him the 23, 25 million per he's looking for, find a way to tack on a few of those million onto void years into 2028 and beyond, push all your chips in for the next 2 years, because this is your window. And ultimately, if you do have some success over the next 2 years, I think that extends it even further beyond that, because then your young core is going to feel that excitement of winning football in New York with this crowd, with that stadium, and they're ultimately going to want to build on something here post Aaron Rodgers. And so that's where things could get really fun. So hopefully they can find a way to get this thing done, but we'll see what happens. Talk to you guys later.